Who is Robert Chambers? And did he kill Jennifer Levin? The Preppie murder, true story explained. For starters, Chambers told police that he hid in a bush while they investigated the crime. Listen now to an audio.
Suspect is under arrest in the murder of a young woman whose body was found in Central Park, and police say he was not a stranger.
What brought this beautiful girl to Central Park?
And from that story, you can usually solve the case.
When we saw the young person who was accused, everybody in the newsroom stopped in their tracks.
Robert Chambers told police that the victim, 18-year-old Jennifer Levin, attacked him during a pre-dawn sexual encounter in Central Park.
I couldn't believe the amount of press that was at this trial from all over the world.
Before O.J. Simpson, the Preppie killer was the trial of the century.
He killed her in cold blood with his bare hands.
This narrative has become something completely different than what it was. Robert is a symbol of white male beauty and money.
It's been more than 30 years since the so-called Preppie murder dominated conversation and headlines in New York City. The tantalizing story was a tabloid blockbuster. Wealth, privilege, alcohol, sex, and in the end, a handsome young man, Robert Chambers, murdered a beautiful young woman, Jennifer Levin, in Central Park. But the true story behind the infamous Preppie murder is anything but glamorous. We attempt to gather by many interviews and documentation to take viewers through evidence that couldn't be revealed at trial, to examine the 1986 murder of Jennifer Levin, the woman at the center of the case. We will also look at the life of Robert Chambers, who pleaded guilty to killing the 18-year-old after running into her in a nearby bar in 1986. Robert Chambers, who was 19 at the time of Jennifer Levin's murder and is now 53, is the only child of Phyllis Chambers, an Irish-born nurse, and Robert Chambers Sr., who worked for MCA Records and later in videocassette distribution. The family lived in Jackson Heights, a working-class neighborhood in Queens, before moving to Manhattan. Chambers spent his teenage years living in a 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, which sat beside the former Andrew Carnegie Mansion. His parents separated in the late 1980s, according to media reports from the time. Classmates remembered Chambers as having a magnetic, movie star quality with his piercing blue eyes and traditional good looks. He was a cadet in the Knickerbocker Grays, a drill team for kids from prominent families, according to a New York Times article from 1986. He attended the best private schools, like Kilt and Browning, but was kicked out for bad behavior and grades. He attended Boston University for one semester, but was also dismissed. An advisor told New York Magazine he was treated for cocaine addiction at a drug rehab program in Minnesota the spring before the murder. But nevertheless, when he returned to his elite New York City circle, Robert maintained his popularity and had girls thrown themselves at his feet. A friend told the publication, Jack Dorian, whose wife and daughter owned Dorian's Red Hand, where Chambers was last seen with Levin, called the 6 feet 3-inch, 220-pound boy a lollipop. Okay, so who was Jennifer Levin? Jennifer Levin was a popular, bubbly 18-year-old girl, days away from leaving for her first year at Chamberlain Junior College in Boston when she walked into Dorian's Red Hand, a New York City bar, that August. She was voted the best looking in her class at the Baldwin School, another elite institution in New York City. According to a reporter from New York Magazine, the teen was living with her father and stepmother in Soho after moving out of her mother's home in Long Island earlier that year. Jennifer was a great kid, responsible, loyal, loving, and kind. Her mother, Ellen Levin, would later tell the New York Times. She had a gift of making people smile by walking in the room. She was filled with life and zest and brightness. She touched everyone. She knew, even some she didn't know. Chambers recalled meeting Levin at a party. She had a pretty face, funny laugh, and was smart and compassionate. The people found Levin's dead body in the park while Chambers watched from nearby. On August 26, Levin and Chambers ran into each other at Dorian's. They had met before through mutual friends and went on 2 or 3 dates. According to reports from the time, the bar catered to the sons and daughters of the rich, according to 48 Hours special on the murder. Levin was celebrating her upcoming move to Boston with friends when she saw Chambers. They began talking, and about 3:45 a.m., they walked towards Central Park, which was about 5 blocks away. A cyclist found Levin's body at about 6:15 a.m., but she is estimated to have died around 5:30 a.m. Police soon taped off the crime scene where Levin's body was twisted and laying half naked in the park. She was badly bruised and had cuts on her face. Her white tank top blouse was tied around her neck like a noose. A medical examiner would testify at Chambers' trial this to be true. Chambers would later tell police that he stayed behind and hid in a bush while the NYPD investigated. Soon, Chambers was arrested after police found him with cuts on his face. Linda Fairstein, who was head of the sex crime unit of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office at the time, told that Chambers returned home at some point. They initially were looking for his help because he was Levin's friend. That changed when the detectives saw deep flesh, bloody scratches on both sides of his face. He told police his cat scratched him, but officers remained unconvinced and arrested the teenager. Police later found more scratches on his chest and a hand injury. While he was being walked out of his home in handcuffs, Chambers turned to his father and said, "That effing bee. Why didn't she leave me alone?" According to Linda Wolf, who wrote about the case in her book, the rough sex defense arose at trial. In videos taken at the police station, Chambers told officers that he and Levin got into an argument while walking on Fifth Avenue. He said he told Levin he didn't want to be in a serious relationship, and she reacted violently, scratching his face. They continued walking, eventually into the park, where they began fooling around. Chambers said that Levin tried his hands behind his back with his underwear. She's having her way with me in the park without my consent, with my hands behind my back, hurting me, he told the police. She reached down and grabbed my testicles for a couple of seconds. She squeezed impossibly the nails. It hurt. Chambers also told police that he was shocked by the aggressive move and sat up and swung his arm, hitting Levin in the throat. I would have to say I hit her hard. I made her fall to the side, Chambers said in an interview. He explained he didn't realize she was dead until he stood up and asked her to leave. She didn't move. Her eyes were open. Chambers said in an interview, I knew something was wrong. Despite that, he didn't call the police, listen for a heartbeat, or attempt CPR. Fairstein said this defense didn't make sense. Everything he said in that statement about how she died is absolutely untrue. Fairstein said she died not from rough sex, but a violent struggle in the park. Chambers' trial began on January 4, 1988, facing a second-degree murder charge. Chambers' trial spanned 13 weeks. He and his model-esque good looks made for compelling cover stories, not unlike infamous serial killer Ted Bundy a decade prior. Levin didn't fare as well. Painted as a dominatrix in the press, she was slut-shamed and accused of keeping a sex diary. Fact is, she had a book with dates and times. She was meeting friends, but there was no evidence in it that had anything to do with her sex life. After 9 days, the jury couldn't reach a verdict. Chambers made a deal with prosecutors, agreeing to plead guilty to a first-degree manslaughter charge that carried a 5 to 15-year sentence. He was also required to admit that he intended to hurt Levin, enough so to cause her death. And he says, quote, "It breaks my heart to have to say that," end quote. The Levin family has gone through hell because of my actions, and I am sorry. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison that April. A video surfaced showing another darker side of Chambers. Though his court statement might have seemed convincing, this seemed to show a more callous side of the 21-year-old Chambers. In it, he was surrounded by scantily dressed women, including his then girlfriend, 19-year-old Sean Covell, while twisting the neck of a Barbie doll, mocking a strangulation. In a falsetto voice, he said, "My name is," twisting the doll's head while smiling and facing the camera, he said, "Oops, I think I killed her." Chambers was released from prison in 2003 for a while. After he was released, Chambers granted one interview. In that interview, he maintained he did not try to hurt Levin and expressed remorse. Robert Chambers, upon his release from Auburn Correctional Facility also said the video with the Barbie was inappropriate, but that he was not reenacting a crime. If I was thinking, I would never have been there. I was stupid and arrogant. How could you be that dumb? A reporter asked. It seems to be a theme in a lot of what I do, Chambers said. Drug charges landed Chambers back in jail. By November 2004, Chambers was in trouble again. Police found traces of heroin and cocaine in a car he was driving with a suspended license. He was sentenced to 100 days in prison. Then, in August 2008, more than 20 years after he was charged with killing Levin, Chambers pleaded guilty to selling cocaine out of a midtown Manhattan apartment. He was sentenced to 19 years and 4 months and 5 years probation, according to the media. The earliest Chambers will be released is no sooner than 2024. Fairstein said ahead of Chambers' most recent sentencing that she hoped for a harsher sentence. I think he's somebody who should never walk among us again. He's been given chance after chance after chance. He took the life of a friend, an 18-year-old girl, with his bare hands.